In another episode of Undertaker being right, he criticized Tony Khan, and a lot of people got upset. His criticism was vague, and it was also quite mild. He didn't say that he was absolute garbage or anything like that. But because he dared criticize King Emperor Khan, all of a sudden, the people hate him. Well, the certain people hate him. The people who are always complaining hate him. So let's get into it. First, we're going to evaluate what Undertaker actually said, and then we're going to look at some of the responses. Let's get into it. Undertaker on his podcast said, quote, "Hopefully one day AEW gets their crap together and genuinely creates some competition." That's probably not a popular take from most WWE insiders, but the way I look at it, competition is only going to make you better. I have nothing against the man, but I don't know that Tony is the guy to run the company. I mean, his heart's in a good place, and he wants to do something, but I just don't know that he has the acumen to run a wrestling company against the juggernaut that is the WWE. But hey, I could be wrong. There was that one other time I was wrong, but I hope they get it together and we do have some competition. It's better for the wrestlers. It's better for the audience, the fans. It's better for everything. Not even a legitimate criticism to be had on the cultish side. Undertaker says, "Hey, I hope this company's turning everything around, man. You gotta do right." I mean, when you look at the business, right now there's people arguing with Brian Alvarez about the ratings for Dynamite. The ratings for Dynamite were under 700,000 viewers, and it was not looking good. It didn't look good. And people are looking at the empty arena, all the empty seats, and they're saying, brother, it is not looking good. The product is cold as ice, and people are saying, brother, this thing is not looking good. And somebody else just turns up and says, well, I hope they turn it around. I hope they get better because it's good for the boys, good for the business, good for the fans. They have more options. But I'm not so sure that Tony Khan is the right guy. And this led to arguments and frustration online. I am in a position right now where, I have to say, is there any serious criticism to be had against Tony Khan? Can you criticize Tony Khan in any way and it be legitimate and be honest? This is an honest criticism. He's got the money, but that doesn't mean he should be running it or he just shouldn't be writing it. He should just be the money guy. Wrestling is filled with money guys. Panda Energy for a long time was just a financier behind TNA. Jim Crockett was for a long time just the money behind Jim Crockett Promotions. He wasn't the booker, too. Ted Turner was just the money guy. Todd Gordon for a long time. But ECW was just the money. Sometimes, in order to have more of what you want, you have to take less control of it. Tony Khan can smother AEW to death. If he wants to, it's his money. But when you consider that he supposedly did this for the sickos, for the fans, you're going to say, we're going to run it into the ground rather let somebody else run it. That's ridiculous. We get it. It's your money. We get it. You're the boss. We get that. But if it comes down to AEW losing a ton of money and potentially getting kicked off the air and going out of business, or letting somebody else run the thing, just with a little bit of input from you, but letting them run it, and you just enjoy the matches and enjoy the show or whatever, which is the better idea? It seems from the beginning, the idea was for Tony Khan to run his own wrestling company or bust. And that's literally it. It's not for the fans. It's for the sickos. It's for himself. Just like he says he books for the sickos. He books for people like himself. He books for the cage match crowd. It got to the point recently where Alvarez and all of those guys are doing videos saying you can't just book for the sickos. People are trying to tell you to broaden your audience. People are trying to tell you, it's one thing when the buildings are full, ratings are up, and people are telling you that the product sucks. Because this is what Vince McMahon had to deal with for years. You know, selling more merchandise than ever, profits are up. People are saying, oh, the shows are terrible. It's like, why is the building full if the show is terrible? Like, routinely. But it could not be to that person's taste. Which is, you know, how WWE is now for me. It's not to my taste. But then there's these objective issues. Empty buildings. You can't barely give tickets away. Not really moving merchandise. TV ratings in a slump. Nobody's talking about the show around the campfire, even online. All the talk is about drama and not about the stories on the show or the wrestlers or the wrestling. They're just hoping you get more guys. Hey, hopefully Ricochet will turn it around. Hopefully Mercedes Moné will turn it around. Not about how good it is right now. There was a time where AEW has never been to my taste, but the show was doing good. And I was arguing, and I would say this, when CM Punk first came in, I was saying, I hate this show, but I'm arguing against success. It's working. What they're doing is working. But now, I'm still saying the same thing, but I'm saying it ain't working. And you can look and see that it's not working. I am on the train that Tony Khan at some point should reconsider letting this thing go. Either close it down or let somebody else run it. I don't know what else to say. But this criticism was very mild. He didn't even talk about cocaine or nothing. He didn't go after the guy or nothing. He just said, consider, you know, I'm not sure you have the acumen, the experience to run a wrestling company. Maybe you should have been a co-booker. Maybe you should have brought in somebody who knew what they were doing and sat down and collaborated with you, and you can learn from them. And then maybe in time, you could give up, you could take control. You know, like Triple H, who sat next to Vince for years and years, who was in there with guys like Bruce Pritchard for years and years, who had been pitching ideas for 20 years. It seems like a natural thing that he would take over. You coming straight from who knows where, deciding I'm going to book a wrestling show with zero experience. You're doing it for the sickos. It's kind of weird. But let's get into some of the responses, because this is what you're here for. Coming from Vince's closest confidant, I'm not even surprised by the hypocrisy. Like, what are you talking about? We're not even talking about Vince. We're not talking about WWE at all. We're talking about Tony Khan's ability to run a wrestling company. That's what we're talking about here. Why are we off that subject? How many jobs has Undertaker created in pro wrestling? How many wrestling shows has Undertaker put on for wrestling fans? Wrestlers giving advice to promoters is like fans giving advice to the wrestlers. Stay in your lane. It's amazing because there's people out here who are not even 30 years old who are telling Vince McMahon he's too old to book a wrestling company. Like, what do you know about anything? You know, you have absolutely no experience. Tony Khan was one of these such people, by the way, who when he started a wrestling company, he was on the message boards criticizing WWE and didn't know the first thing about running a company. Well, running a wrestling company, let's be precise. Look, I don't need to know how to bake an apple pie to be able to tell you if an apple pie is baked wrong. If it's burnt, it's wrong. If it's nasty, you did something wrong. I don't know what apple pie is supposed to taste like. So you don't need to know how to do it to be able to tell somebody you're probably doing it wrong. And it should be pretty, again, empty buildings, ratings in a slump, no matter who you bring in, it ain't picking up. It's not the fans that is the problem. It is not Tony Khan getting criticized that's the problem. Maybe he should internalize the criticism a little bit and pay attention. One, I doubt Mark Calloway sits around watching AEW programming to know what it needs. Two, the dude was a 20-plus year cartoon character. That shit won't fly in AEW. Have you not watched AEW? Do you not see House of Black literally ripping off Undertaker every goddamn week? Well, they're not on TV enough to rip them off every week. They're ripping them off whenever they show up. Orange Cassidy doing fake kicks. I mean, Chris Jericho is a cartoon character and has been one the entire time he's been in AEW. You wish you had an Undertaker. Now, point one, I actually agree. I don't think he's watched enough AEW to really care or really give an in-depth criticism. I'm pretty sure he's watched a show here and there. He's probably watched some of the guys that he knows, like Jericho and Edge. He's probably watched some of that stuff. But you think he's sitting down watching all of Dynamite and Rampage and Collision? Please. Please. These guys have wives and lives and stuff to do. You got fish to catch. I think he's playing PlayStation 5 now. He's learning the joy of video games in his retirement. He ain't about to sit here and waste his life watching AEW. You got to be kidding me. Coming from the guy that still hitches his wagon to Vince, the more Taker opens his mouth, the more I long for the days when Paul Bearer was his mouthpiece. This is insane. Okay? Again, ad hominem attack in response to light criticism. I wouldn't even say it was mild. I'm going to turn it down. It wasn't even mild. It was light. He basically saying, I don't know enough about Tony. He might not be the guy. He also said, I could be wrong. He left the door open to say, I could be wrong. He's not wrong. But he at least had the humility enough to say, I could be wrong. He's not, though. And anybody who watches this show has watched it deteriorate right in front of them. You can't be serious. Let's go. Continue. TK has his faults, sure. But I don't know why we are acting like he doesn't know what he's doing. Sting's retirement in AEW run is a perfect example. Well, let's evaluate that run. Sting won every match. Didn't put anybody over. He was in a tag team the entire time, so somebody else gets to take all the bumps and do all. Now, Sting, to his credit, jumped off a thing or two, but he mostly just no-sold offense and won the match. That was pretty much it. And then the retirement, it wasn't like they booked some kind of great angle for Sting's retirement. Sting announced he was retiring whether he won or lost, and that was it. It was all about shoehorning an opponent in there. It wasn't like there was some big dramatic story that was told. He was put in a tag team in order to cover up his limitations, but the guy is 60, so that was good. And it wasn't like his finishing angle was booked, fantastically. He just said, you know what? I'm done right at this pay-per-view. And everybody flocked to see it. Everybody flocked to buy it because people believed in it. And people wanted to see Sting go by. And it was great. But that's it. That was the angle. That was the match. There was no long-term story being told. There was no big payoff. And you giving him Tony Khan too much credit. LOL, Taker don't know what he's talking about, cause Tony is the reason AEW is around. The real problem is all these hate spreaders on outlets constantly talking about AEW when it's reality they've never seen a show. What? I've watched every single episode of every AEW Dynamite since it aired. I have not missed one episode. I have watched every single episode of... No, I've watched at least half of every Collision that has ever aired. I've almost given up on Collision. It's almost an unwatchable show. It's pointless. You cannot tell me that I can't criticize the show. I've been watching the show. I watched the show. I watched the show when it was in the pandemic and the arena was empty. I watched the show when they were sneaking fans into the building and all the wrestling media was really hush about it. They didn't say anything. When they were stuck in Daly's place. When they started traveling. When CM Punk came in. When Edge came in. When Mercedes Moné came in. I was watching the whole time. I'm telling you. Something is wrong with the product. Something's wrong. And it's really strange that they got higher quality talent now, bigger names now, and the show has never drawn less. So it's not the talent. They were filling buildings when Joey Janela was on the card. Now you got Edge on the card and you can't half fill a building? Something is wrong. You mean to tell me that the building was full when you started, when we had, what's that they them person? Shit. I'm not even going to go into that. But when you had absolutely terrible talent, like Big Swole on the card, they were selling tickets. Now they can't sell a ticket anywhere. Half filled buildings all over the place. Something's wrong. You need to pay attention. The Undertaker needs to mind his own business, sucking WWE dick. Yikes. Oof. Oof. Oh my God. Undertaker is a clown trying to stay relevant. He's a clown. Look, you just do your own thing, man. I don't see a problem with letting people fall on their face. You know, you can only give people so much advice. You can only be nice to such a degree before you have to let people fall. Undertaker's criticism wasn't constructive. Let's not do this. He's a pro WWE guy, and rightfully so. There was more than one way to achieve that level of success. Stop the cap. All right, are you achieving that level of success when your ratings are lower than NXT's? Is that, but the NBA Finals were on. Somebody showed how the NBA Finals have affected Dynamite over the years. Progressively worse every single year. They're not growing. They're constricting. At some point, only the sickos will be left. And then what? You'll be bumping millions of dollars into a product that only a handful of people want to watch. And I guess as long as one of those people is Tony Khan himself, then that's fine. So, I mean, I don't know. You tell me. I don't know what more to say except you're arguing with the wall because we're looking at empty buildings. We're looking at everything being slower than it used to be. That's basically what we're looking at here. I truly believe they talk about AEW so much because AEW is becoming a threat to them. The small t-shirt company is doing better than they could have ever expected, clearly. Man, this tweet is 5 years stale. Maybe in 2020, this was a valid point. But in 2024, AEW is struggling. They're struggling, bruh. But this is what it means to be in the cult. You know, it's like we're still winning even when we're losing. We still got a chance even when we're underwater. It's like, you know, the Titanic is, the tip is up, the band is sliding into the water, and you're like, it's not a big deal. There's nothing going on here. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. It's like, okay, sure. Can people remember this when TK hits back in interviews? He's constantly under attack from legends for daring to start a fucking wrestling company. He's doing something right if he's upsetting people. Carry on, Tony Khan. You've revolutionized the industry. Okay. All right. Okie dokie. Holy hell. This is an interesting. This is an interesting one, man. I kind of have the desire to ask trustworthy voice like Dax, how long has Undertaker been in with AEW to speak so authoritatively on things like this? That's wild. We had no idea he's been there so extensively. No, he's not even talking about the backstage part, which is only part of it. You know, the backstage part of it is only a piece. He's saying that Tony Khan cannot compete. I think that if you look at the product, he cannot compete. I think if you looked at the last 5 years, nobody would expect them to be on that level if they were intellectually honest. people would say AEW has overperformed. They overperformed for the first couple of years. But the last 2 years, especially, things have been rough. Very rough. And I think people should be honest about that. He doesn't need to have any experience to know this. He doesn't need to actually literally be in the locker room to know this. The fact that there's people trying to get out of that contracts and they ain't been there that long. I mean, you had pretty much Andrade quit. Miro pretty much quit. Ricky Starks has pretty much quit. When WWE had guys going on Twitter every single week asking for releases, begging to get out of there, the AEW fans were like, look. But now it's AEW guys who are pretty much like, please let me out of this company. Please let me out of this contract. And they're like, everything's great. Thumbs up, bruh. It's like, why the switch up? Why are you switching up? Tony Khan doesn't need to run it against them. He needs to run it alongside them. They don't need to beat WWE. The whole purpose of AEW is to provide an option, an alternative, not a replacement. It doesn't need to be competition. And they are the only ones who are treating it like it is. What? Tony Khan, didn't he just say the whole Weinstein Company thing and then say WWE was their competition? He said they were up against them. All right? He's the one who's been saying this stuff the entire time. I don't get, look, generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with this comment. You know, Tony Khan should be focused on running his company and running alongside WWE, doing the best that he possibly can and providing an alternative and an option for talent. But this is what Undertaker is saying. If you want to have this option, this alternative, you're going to have to do better than you are doing. Otherwise, your company is going to get shut off, like TNA did, where TNA was running alongside WWE, but they wanted to be competition. They ran head-to-head, lost. And then through other business chicanery, they ended up in the position that they're in now. He's saying, look, you might not be the guy that can do this. It might need to be somebody else. What's the problem with that? He's not saying the company needs to go away. He's not saying AEW needs to die. He's saying that if they really want to get in the fight, they're going to have to do better. Oh, here's an absolutely brilliant one. He's very confused as to why Bowens hasn't been bullied and publicly humiliated to the brink of suicide over his sexuality, because that's leadership to him. Because we're still on this bullshit about Canyon. You know, because people with serious mental illness doesn't go around killing themselves. And quite a few of these people who have serious mental illness tend to be homosexuals. All right. The idea that Canyon was being bullied, and I think Undertaker even had to discuss this on the podcast once, about his hitting Canyon with the chair. And he said it. He hit Canyon with the chair the same way he hit everybody with the chair. And then he didn't even know Canyon was gay at the time that segment was put together. Somebody to this comment replied that he worked with Pat Patterson for years, which is true. People like, Pat Patterson was his boss. Well, maybe. But Orlando Jordan was also there. He's gay. I don't remember him talking about getting bullied. Darren Young, he was there. He was openly gay. Don't remember him talking about getting bullied when Undertaker was in that locker room with him. Funny how Canyon was the only one. When he killed himself, all of a sudden, it was because he was getting bullied specifically by this one person, even though evidence of your eyeballs, again, Undertaker dotted Maven with that chair. I mean, he absolutely destroyed Maven with that chair. He looked like a normal person's neck would have shattered the way he hit Brock Lesnar with a chair. Did you see how he hit Vince McMahon with that shovel? I mean, people can believe what they want to. And when you're wrapping yourself in these rainbow cocoons or in this cocoon of identity politics, you can believe whatever you want. But I genuinely believe that why would he pick Canyon? Of all the gay people that have come through that locker room. Why would he pick Canyon to be the one he's gonna bully and force him to kill himself? Doesn't seem sensible to me. I mean, people who were very close to Canyon talked about him having a problem. Mood swings, ill-tempered, sound like he had bipolar disorder. I'm not a doctor, but he sounded like a guy with serious mental problems. And he killed himself. Why? I don't understand why it has to be somebody else's fault when people kill themselves. It's not somebody else's fault. There's a defect with the person themselves. That's why they're taking it out on themselves. Whatever. It's going to move on. Tony Khan created, and ran the biggest wrestling show ever. Hashtag AEW All In. And Undertaker doesn't think he has what it takes. Ha ha ha. Get the fuck out of here with your WW ass licking. Taker is bought and paid for. What a fucking joke. Give Tony Khan his props. Because we're still believing that All In number. People are arguing about WrestleMania now. They're arguing about the numbers to WrestleMania. And they start arguing about All In. What's done is done. I don't care. Let's say that it's true that Tony Khan promoted the biggest wrestling event of all time. Let's say that it's true. What does it have to do with anything today? Why are the buildings not full today? Why has it been a slow but gradual decline since then? Was probably the most full building they've had in a year was the Wembley show. They ain't got nowhere close to it. Well, I guess the Sting show, because Sting was retiring. Have they gotten close to selling out a building since? Some of these collisions, they look like libraries. There's so much open space. You might as well put a ball pit in there. You might as well put a swing set in there. There's enough room for a slide and some monkey bars. There's so much space on some of these collision shows. And these people will tell you, what, he did the biggest show of all time. Okay. All right. Whatever you say, boss. I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, imagine somebody telling you about Vince McMahon, you're talking about Vince, and they mention WrestleMania 3. And you're like, oh, okay, that was like 40 years ago, man. That's a long time ago, brother. This, not All In wasn't a long time ago, but it feels like it. It feels like it was a long time ago. All the vibes around AEW, gone. All the hype around AEW, gone. I'm not even hearing anything about how ticket sales are moving for All In right now. It's June. The show is in 2 months. I think it's in August. I'm not hearing nothing about that show. Almost no energy at all about that show. So even if you want to say that All In was the biggest show of all time, it don't help them in June 2024. It ain't helping. A lot of the guys who were stars on that show, barely on the show today. Adam Cole, who was in the main event, he's not even featured on the show today because he's hurt. He's been hurt since then. MJF just came back. CM Punk was in the opening match of All In. He doesn't even work there anymore. Samoa Joe is doing a tag team with Hook. And I don't want to go through the entire card, but those are like the top guys. Okay. I mean, even the big one who, Saraya won the world title at that show. She's on Rampage routinely today. How did it really benefit the product in the long term? It hasn't even been a full year yet. It's been 10 months. All right. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression.